What's going on, guys? In this video we're going to tackle an issue that we discovered in last week's video. Take a look. So we noticed that this was leaking, not leaking, but it was low on brake fluid. Turns out it's because we do have a brake leak here in the rear brake line. Let me take that camera. Folks, in there she is. You see her dripping? We filled up the reservoir with brake fluid, started pumping the brakes, and then we started hearing psh, psh. And there it is. That's where we got our brake leak. And the line, I'm not sure if you can really tell, but the line is cooked. So we're gonna need a new rear brake line. Hey Nicole, go step on the brake very slowly.
Alright, hold on.
Yep, that's it. So definitely need a new one of those. So today we're gonna fix that brake line. We went and ordered some 3/16 brake line, and that came with a bunch of random fittings that we'll be able to choose what we need, and we'll have extras for future projects. Let's head out there and do it. Okay, so we're back under the Jeep. We are going to attempt to get that off using some channel locks. And I'll be right back, because I can't do this with one hand. And through the grace of channel locks, we were able to get it loosened up. It is broken up above it. It's gonna break in half, but the fitting is going to come out of the hose, no problem. Moving the old line out of the way, it's just crumbling with my fingers. And there it is, the old fitting is out. And now we're going to pull this line all the way out. Alright, so we got about 90% of the line removed. I did use a pair of tin snips to slice it up along the way. But even in some spots were so fragile that they just tore off with pulling on it with my hands. But a couple slices made it easier to come out. This right here fell right off. It's so corroded, and it's probably right there where it burst, just from the pressure inside the line. So now we come up over here. This is the line that goes to the rear. I just cut it to pull it out, get it out of the way. Since that's a 14mm fitting, we're just gonna work it until it's out. Okay, so we got the fitting off. The fitting, it looks like it's in fine condition, so we're gonna reuse this one. The one at the back of the Jeep, though, that went into the hose was no good, so we went through our bag of fittings. We found one that fits. We got the hard line. This stuff is very flexible. You can bend it with your hands, so that's going to be easy to shape. Here we got a cheap flaring tool set. We're going to show how each part of this works. And then this is a really cheap eBay pipe cutter. It's starting to fall apart on me. The handle fell off, and part of the slide here broke off, but it'll still do the job. I do need to pick up a new one of these, though. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to double flare our brake line. To do that, we're going to take our line. This stuff is thin and it's easy to bend, so pull some aside. The very first step you're going to do is you're going to take your fitting and slide it on first. Very first step. Don't forget it. Otherwise, after you make your beautiful flare, you're going to have to cut it off in order to get this on. Then we're going to stick the line into our clamp. Our clamp is already down in our vise. Yep, nice and tight. It's not going to move. Having the vise hold this is a game changer. We're going to slide our line into the 3/16 slot of our clamp. But now how far do I make this stick out? That's what we have our die for. That is how far our line has to stick out of this clamp. So we're going to go right there. See that? It's flush. Slide the top of your clamp over. Tighten this down. Double check. We're good on both sides. Sticking out the correct amount. Try to tighten this down. If it starts to get difficult, you can use a screwdriver for extra leverage. You want this to be tight because if the line starts to slip during this process, it's going to ruin the flare and potentially ruin your clamp as well. I've had really cheap clamps break in the past, where these teeth inside strip out and the line gets pushed out. I just have some PB Blaster. This is not mandatory, but it does help make a good flare. We're just gonna put a little bit on the die. Yeah. Just like that. This will help make the flare process smooth. We're gonna take the stick end of the die, slide it right into the line. Take your cone tool, flaring tool, whatever you might want to call this piece, slide it on, come right up, till it sits nicely into your die. Now this is where you're just going to start flaring. This is what you're going to do. You're going to keep cranking this down until that die sits flush against your clamp. Now this might get difficult by hand. Another trick is to use a box wrench. Well, this is a combination, but you want to use the box end. And you can stick it on that rod, help get yourself some more leverage to crank it over with ease. Now come take a look. This is nice and flush. Get a good shot of that. Now it's time to let off. Take her die off. Here we go. Now get a zoom in on that. That's our bubble. Like I said, might want to put some little more lubrication, because now we're going to do our double flare part, where you slide this over. That's probably it. We'll let off now. And there we have our double flare. We're going to let this off. It might not look 100% perfect, but this here will get the job done. We'll show you in just a second. So here we got our double flare. What happens is this brake, the fitting comes up and it crushes this against the proportioning valve. In this case, is where this end is going to head against, and that's going to create a good seal. So this gets more crushed once this is installed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to screw this onto the proportioning valve, and then snake this through to the back of the line so we know how long this needs to be, and we'll cut it down, we'll flare the other side and install it for the last time. So we measured it out, we cut the line to size, double flared it with our fitting. So now we're going to snake this down from the front and we'll catch it from underneath. Alright, so we're tightening up this fitting here that goes into the proportioning valve. I got the line pushed down and snaked around underneath the Jeep. I was able to push the line into the factory clips going all the way from front to back, and we got the line screwed into the soft hose that goes from the frame down to the axle. We're just pouring some brake fluid in now, and we're going to end up bleeding the brakes. If you want to see how to bleed brakes, you can go on to our other video about the 1973 Camaro, We did the full brakes front to back, and I showed you how to bleed the brakes using a hose and a small jar filled with some of this brake fluid.
Brakes are good, and we'll see you in the next one.